Hello everyone, it's Evgenia here with you again. And today I wanted to address one of the major things in video surveillance. What is it about camera quality we need to investigate before we create the requirements? And I hope after today's talk you will know a little bit more. And this is why I invited Vlado Damjanovski, somebody who I know for years and who wrote many books which are called Bible of CCTV, to talk to us about it. Hi, Vlado. How are you today? And please introduce yourself.
Hello, Evgenia. Thank you for inviting me on your YouTube channel. Yes, probably most people would know my name, Vlado Damjanovski. I am an Australian of Macedonian origin. I have written 4 books on CCTV so far. All of them are published and translated in different languages, such as Russian, Korean, German, and Farsi language. Obviously, you can find them in English, which is the original versions on Amazon.com. And based on these books, I typically conduct seminars about CCTV technology, everything you wanted to know. So definitely a important reference for everybody wanting to learn more on CCTV. And thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Vlado, for coming. So I think I'll jump straight to the topic. We've been living in analog world. Right now, we live in IP world for a long time. So what are those characteristics of the camera our end user need to actually also look into when they're choosing the cameras for the projects, maybe with their system integrators together? What are some of the most important parameters they need to look into?
Well, that's a good point that we are in the new digital world, basically IPVSS, as we call it, according to the standards, which is Internet Protocol Video Surveillance Systems, instead of CCTV, which used to be in the past. So the new thing here is that we have many different cameras now that actually offer a variety of number of pixels, so megapixels of different amount, different sensor sizes, different compressions. And this is very different to what was during the analog world, where we only had one, perhaps, or 2 different types of sensors, 1/3 of inch or maybe 2/3 of inch. And because of that, these days we have really problems to understand. Most people that install things have problems to understand what the customer wants to see and what camera to use. In a simple term, not always more pixels means better picture, even though logically you would think, yeah, if I've got 20 megapixels, that's much better than 4 megapixels. This is not the case simply because in CCTV, we always try to keep cost to minimum, which means we try to keep the sensors small and fit as many pixels as we can in there, which actually makes the pixels smaller. And because the pixels are smaller, the simple thing that as a result of it is we've got more noise, especially in low light and higher temperatures. And these are the key practical environments where CCTV is used. If anything happens bad, that we want to capture the criminal that jumped the fence and did something, usually it will happen in low light situation. And that means really 20 megapixels or 8 megapixel camera may be not as good as just 2 megapixel HD camera, which has much larger pixels. That means it picks up the image much better at low light. So because of such a complicated, let's say, a theory that is always trying to compromise between picture quality and compression and how much you can store, obviously, a lot of things can be explained in a seminar, which is what I said I do most of the time, that lasts for a couple of days. And certainly a lot of things are explained in the books. But in essence, there is something that can be very useful to all technical people if they start reading or understanding the concept of pixel density, which was introduced by the latest IEC 62676 standards. And this pixel density, in a way, is a smart way to include everything in one parameter that will be defining how much you can see with the camera. And in that formula, you actually combine focal length, sensor size, how many pixels you've got, how far is the object. And all you have to know is, okay, what is my target that I want to see? People, okay. Human, you need, let's say, 350 pixels per meter to identify a face, or 250 pixels per meter to identify a face. Or you've got number plates of a car. That's another pixel density. So every object can be explained like that. And that's what I suggest is the best way to decide on which camera. So there is no simple single answer. This is the best camera, because it really depends where do you want to use it.
Okay, so let's say, how can we simplify this idea for our end users and our listeners or system integrators who would decide, irrespective of the camera size, how to choose the better image or capabilities with the camera? What are the steps?
Okay, well, the first thing is, as I said, make sure you understand where the camera is going to be installed. What is the application? If, for example, it's a, let's say, shopping center. Shopping center has pretty much constant daylight, constant light during the day, and it's open only whatever time it is open, it's always the same light. So in that case, for example, low light performance may not be as critical, because most of the cameras will see quite okay at the levels that human eye can see. So we are saying, okay, in this case, don't necessarily worry about having larger pixels. Go for a camera that gives you the best picture quality for what you want. So now the next step would be, what do I want to see with this camera? Typically, you would like to see people walking in a shop and out. Probably the shopping center authority wants to have some statistics, how many people go where, in which section. And obviously, based on that, you can decide what focal length you need for that particular camera. I mean, admittedly, these days, that is not a problem like used to be in the past, when we didn't have a varifocal lenses, so-called. These days, most people use varifocal lenses, which means you've got really focal length, anything from 90 degrees angle of view down to maybe 15, 20 degrees. Now, that defines pixel density. So that means make sure you've got then a camera. We said for the first example, we said, okay, don't worry so much about low light camera performance. So then obviously you would choose a camera that has varifocal lens to cover different situations. Then obviously you would have to consider what is the compression that that camera uses. Obviously, most of the time these days we have H.264, H.265. Both of them could be okay to use, but now it depends of who is picking it up and how long you want to store it. Meaning, if the shopping center says, well, we want to store it for 30 days, if it is legal in their jurisdiction, because different countries have different limits, if you want. Then obviously based on that, you say, okay, I want the best picture quality. So people would usually use the highest streaming rate, which is the lowest compression. But don't forget that in CCTV, all compressions are lossy. That means you always have to lose, you will lose something in terms of details. So which one you use? I guess the best way is to test it on site for the application that you have. And that could be one example where perhaps, again, storage will be defined by how many, obviously, terabyte of hard drive you're putting in there, what compression you're using. Also, even though that's not part of the camera as such, it's important to know that whoever sees that, is it an active monitoring, or it is only after the fact of something happening, somebody wants to play back. So both of these define, okay, am I happy with H.265, for example? A lot of people would know, installers would use maybe, you know, a screen with 25 images all over the place, and you can't even see what is that you need to see. Decoding of those things happen by the computer, and it's so-called software decoding, as opposed to hardware encoding that happens in the camera. Now, software decoding depends on the CPU and GPU performance of the computer. So my typical advice to users is don't open 25 images, because you can't possibly look at them. And it is difficult for the computer decoding engine to decode. So all these combined will say, okay, I will use this camera. I need to have varifocal lens. Maybe a comment on what some people don't consider important. Obviously, camera can be outdoor or indoor. If it is in a shopping center, like in my example, indoor is okay. But also we've got, as you know, dome cameras, which most people like to use, but there are also full body cameras or turret dome cameras. I find that if you use dome, often domes distort or deteriorate the image a little bit more. Of course, you have to try and test which one you would prefer. So all these things, in a way, filter down to something that you, at the end, will be obviously the price. Is the price sufficient to cover the cost of the system? And I would say rule number one in my consultancy is never use the cheapest possible items you will find. Get the good quality products, but that good quality products is based on all these factors. Another thing that is difficult to, I guess, verify or test is optical quality. Not all cameras have same optical quality. I'm talking about both optical resolution and distortion. These are the things that the best to justify or to decide which one to go for is to test it yourself again. Unless you have somebody to test it for you, which is part of the business that we do. We do also lab testing for verifying which of these three models is the better one for application. But certainly everybody can test it themselves, because again, you may have exactly the same pixel count sensor, you may have exactly the same varifocal lens, brand A, brand B, brand C, and if you compare them, you will find out that one especially stands out, maybe in a difficult condition like lower light somewhere, or people running, or maybe has better compression for the same stream. There are different little subtleties that actually may decide which one to use.
So, and just for our listeners who don't have time and opportunity to test and to go deep into the knowledge, but they want to have an awareness of what their technologies, are there tools like calculators which they can use, which could give them an idea what to look for?
Of course, that's a good point. I did mention, among other things, there are many calculators out there, but among other things that we produce, Video Labs, we also have a app called Video Labs Calculator, which I developed both for iOS and Android. Actually, if people visit our website, videolabs.com, you will see over there is an app button, and you will see using such application. And again, I'm not saying this is the only one, but I believe in many instances this would be the easiest to use and cheapest. You can calculate the pixel density, which means if you know an object is such a distance and you want to get it identification right, you basically enter in there the sensor dimensions. So all you have to know is, irrespective of what brand it is, we don't have millions of brands like VMS people that offer you a list of different models of every brand. All you need to know is the sensor that camera uses, because sensors are usually disclosed in the specifications of a camera. Based on the sensor size and pixel known, if you enter those details, then you exactly can say, okay, my object is 10 meters away, I want to see that much wide, I want to have 300 or 200 pixels per meter density, and all that will tell you, okay, you need to set your camera with such a focal length, and you will get that what you wanted to achieve. So that definitely is a useful tool to have for anybody.
So to make it more simple again, if you think and summarize it, it's all about application, first of all. It's about inside and outside, and it's about big time about the light conditions.
Of course.
And these are three major parameters what I hear we need to take in consideration. Just drop them in the calculator, see the sensors and potentially resolution which you will need, and then just give the comparison on the market from the different cameras and make sure that you have the right density to address the quality of the camera, which is not necessarily, as it said, per standard. Sometimes you need it higher just because you want to see the face, or you want to see the banknote, or you want to see the coin, or generally you actually don't want, you just want to have a slight idea about the public space, and you don't want to intrude the privacy as well. But thinking about it, I have another question. These days, it's a lot of talking about the cybersecurity and potential vulnerability of the cameras. From my understanding, as soon as we bring encryption on the camera, that will change the camera parameters as well from the price perspective and the processor on the camera. So what are your thoughts about it?
Look, I don't think that's that big of a problem like some people make it. I'll be honest, what I see discussions in the industry really, in my opinion, personal opinion, is more political rather than technical, simply because every camera, like every computer device, has certain protection by first level by the password that you put in there when you start it up. If you don't change it by default, you're vulnerable. Now,
Right.
obviously, sensors and chips, camera firmware or software, these days is very easy to use encryption. So basically, that's embedded. All you have to do is just create a strong password. In fact, a lot of them now, from the experience they had in the past, some of the major manufacturers, I don't want to mention any names, but most of them now, when you first time open the camera before you use it, it won't let you do anything unless you create a password. And even then, it will force you to create a complicated password that is very difficult to crack. And that, in my opinion, is sufficient for our industry. Now, clearly, I'm thinking and talking about system that is closed environment. So like closed circuit television, this will be a closed network. If you start having a remotely accessible system that a lot of people want to do, then obviously you have to rely on the encryption for the communication part. And obviously you need to rely on the network switching and IT managers' knowledge of protecting such a network with VLANs, and obviously they are also high secure and so forth. So I don't think that enable encryption on the camera will increase the processing power of the camera, because again, the biggest processing that the camera wastes these days is traditionally or simply encoding is a very mathematically intensive process, which is happening in the hardware, as I said, in the cameras. And because of that, you don't really need to worry about it. It's already, the hardware is designed to encode on the fly because it's only one channel that the camera is doing. Maybe the more complicated, power-hungry process would be if you've got analytics in the camera. And even then, you've got certain amount of processing power that the manufacturer will tell you, we can only do so much analytics that processes that many objects or that quickly every second. That can increase the requirement for power. But other than that, just normal streaming shouldn't be affected, except maybe one more thing that is important, again, to do with the electronics and encoding power of a camera. A lot of people are not aware that one encoder and sensor cannot stream 200 users at the same time with the same quality, which is why we've got second stream, third stream, or if that is not enough, if you've got multiple of users, then you have to somehow do multicasting, which is again then network issue, not really so much our, but the camera is the one that initiates that.
Understood. Well, that kind of summarizes the cybersecurity in simple cybersecurity hygiene. Change your passwords, do the basics.
Exactly. Don't leave it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everybody knows that one.
Great. Thank you, Vlado. Today time has flown, but I will invite you for 2 more videos for specific examples in retail and banking, and we can talk about the in-depth use case for those verticals. But for today, thank you everyone for listening. Please visit Vlado's website, which is vdlabs.com. You can actually see it on the shirt, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Evgenia, for the opportunity, and you're always welcome to have a chat with me. Any topics you like on CCTV, I'm more than happy to give my opinion. Thank you.